Hey there, and a big welcome back to Speak More Fluently.
Great to be diving in again.
Today, we're tackling something really core to English, those colorful phrases, idioms.
Ah, yes, idioms. They can be fun, but sometimes a bit baffling. Yeah.
Totally. Have you ever been watching a movie, maybe listening to music, and you hear a phrase?
Mm-hmm.
You know all the words, but it just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. That's probably an idiom tripping you up.
Exactly. So stick with us for this deep dive. We're going to, break down what idioms actually are.
And crucially, why they matter so much for intermediate learners wanting to sound, well, more fluent.
Right, more natural. And we'll look at how you can actually learn and understand them without feeling totally overwhelmed.
Think of it like getting a key to unlock a whole new level of English conversation. It's going to be useful.
Definitely. So first things first, what is an idiom, fundamentally?
Well, simply put, it's a fixed expression where the overall meaning is totally different from the literal meaning of the words themselves.
Okay, so you can't just add up the dictionary definitions of each word.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And often, they're deeply connected to the history and culture of English speakers. That's what makes them unique.
Can you give us a classic example?
Sure. How about throw in the towel?
Okay, throw in the towel. Literally, I'm picturing, I don't know, dropping a beach towel.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh.
But idiomatically, it means to give up, to quit.
Yeah.
Usually because something's too difficult.
Ah, right, like admitting defeat.
Exactly.
Mm.
And that image, the towel, it actually comes from the world of boxing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when a boxer's corner throws a towel into the ring, it's a signal. It means their fighter can't continue the match.
Wow, so there's a whole story behind it. That hidden context is fascinating.
It really is. And there are loads of different types of idioms, too. It's not just one category.
Like what?
Well, some are very tied to cultural understanding. Think about spill the tea.
Spill the tea. Love that one. It's pretty current, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It basically means sharing gossip or interesting news.
Right, like tell me the juicy details.
Exactly. And what's interesting is its roots in African-American vernacular English. It really shows how language evolves within communities.
That's a great point. Okay, what other kinds are there?
Then you have idioms that use metaphors, creating a strong mental image, like fall on stony ground.
Fall on stony ground. Okay, I can picture seeds landing on rocks, not soil.
Precisely. So the idiom means an idea, a suggestion, maybe even a warning, was ignored or didn't get a positive reception. It just didn't take root.
That nature imagery makes it quite memorable.
It does. And then there are tons that are built around common verbs, plus prepositions. We call them phrasal idioms.
Ah, like phrasal verbs, but with a fixed idiomatic meaning.
Sort of, yeah. Take turn over a new leaf.
Literally maybe turning a page in a notebook.
Could be. But the idiom means to start fresh, to reform, to begin behaving in a better way.
Right, like making a New Year's resolution stick. It's amazing how those simple word pairs get a whole new meaning.
It really is. And finally, you have the more slangy or colloquial idioms that pop up, especially nowadays, like saying something is giving summer.
Oh yeah, it's giving summer. You hear that a lot online.
Mm-hmm. It just instantly creates a vibe of feeling sunshine, holidays, relaxation, whatever summer means to you.
It shows how informal and playful English can be.
Totally. Now, for you listening, if you're serious about getting more fluent, understanding these idioms isn't just, a nice extra. It's actually pretty essential.
Why is that? Just because they sound cool?
Well, partly, but mostly because they are everywhere. In spoken English, definitely, but also in writing.
So listening to podcasts, maybe browsing Apple Podcasts for shows?
Yep, or watching films, reading news articles, even scrolling through social media. Idioms constantly pop up.
And if you only understand the literal words, you could miss the whole point of what someone's saying.
Exactly. You might get the gist, but you miss the nuance, the color, the actual intended message sometimes. So knowing idioms directly boosts your comprehension.
Makes sense. Better understanding of real-world English.
And it's not just about understanding, it's about using them too. When you can sprinkle appropriate idioms into your own conversation naturally.
It signals something, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows a higher level of fluency, a real comfort with the language. And it helps you connect more with native speakers on a kind of cultural level.
Because you're showing you understand those nuances, those shared expressions.
Precisely.
Okay, so they're clearly important. But let's be honest, learning them feels, a bit daunting. What makes them so challenging for learners?
Well, the biggest thing, as we sort of said, is that non-literal meaning. Your existing vocabulary knowledge might not help much if you don't know the phrase.
Right, the meaning isn't compositional. Word one plus word two doesn't equal the idiom's meaning.
Exactly. That gap is the main hurdle.
And the cultural thing you mentioned.
Yeah, that's another big one. If an idiom refers to, say, a historical event or a specific cultural practice you're unfamiliar with.
It can be impossible to guess the meaning.
Right. You lack the context. Resources from places like Cambridge University Press often stress how important that cultural background is.
And it's not just understanding, it's also about using them correctly, isn't it? Like knowing when it's okay to use one.
Oh, absolutely. Register is key. Some idioms are super informal, really slangy.
So you wouldn't want to use spill the tea in a formal job interview, presumably.
Probably not. Using an idiom in the wrong situation, the wrong level of formality, can sound awkward or even inappropriate.
Okay, so lots to think about, but it's not impossible. What are some good strategies for actually learning idioms effectively?
Well, one of the best ways is exposure and context. Don't just memorize lists.
Right, see them or hear them used naturally.
Exactly. Like listening to podcasts, BBC Learning English has a great one called The English We Speak.
Oh, yeah. What's good about that one?
It specifically takes everyday idioms, presents them in a short conversation, and then explains what they mean and how they're used. Perfect contextual learning.
That sounds ideal. Hearing it in action really helps it stick. What else?
Another technique is grouping idioms by theme.
How does that work?
So you might learn idioms related to, say, colors like feeling blue, or green with envy, or maybe animals, or food.
Ah, okay, so your brain can kind of categorize them?
Yeah, it can help with recall, make connections. But a little warning here. Some advice suggests being careful not to group idioms that are only very loosely related thematically.
Why is that?
It could actually cause confusion if the connection isn't strong or logical. So focus on clear, natural groupings.
Got it. Quality over quantity in the grouping. What about making them memorable? They can be quite abstract.
That's where visuals and stories come in. Try to create a mental image for the idiom.
Like we did with throw in the towel and the boxing ring.
Exactly. Or for grind someone's gears, meaning to annoy someone, you could picture actual gears grinding loudly. That image helps lock it in.
A little mental cartoon. I like that. How about making it more active for the learner?
Personalization is huge. Don't just read the definition. Try to use the idiom yourself. Create your own sentences about your life, your opinions, your experiences using the new idiom. Or even write short dialogues. Teaching English resources often highlight this.
So making it relevant to you.
Yes. When you actively apply it, it becomes part of your English, not just something in a book.
That makes a lot of sense. What about connecting it back to your first language? Does that help or hinder?
It can definitely help. Doing a bit of contrastive analysis, as linguists call it.
Okay, what does that involve?
Thinking about whether your native language has a similar expression. Does it use the same image? Or maybe a completely different one to convey the same idea.
Ah, so comparing and contrasting.
Right. It can really highlight what's unique about the English idiom and deepen your understanding. Teaching English mentions this too.
Interesting. And you mentioned seeing how native speakers actually use them, beyond just example sentences.
Yes, using language corpora. These are huge databases of real text and speech.
Like the Cambridge corpus you mentioned.
Exactly. You can search for an idiom and see hundreds of real examples of how it's used, what words often appear nearby, what kinds of texts it's common in. It gives you real-world usage patterns.
Wow, that sounds powerful. Like seeing the idiom in its natural habitat.
It really is. It moves beyond textbook examples to actual usage.
Okay, so lots of good learning strategies. Now, switching gears slightly. If someone is teaching idioms, what are the key things to keep in mind for doing it effectively, based on, say, Cambridge ELT ideas?
Well, a good teaching cycle often starts with clear presentation.
Meaning?
Introduce the idiom clearly. Give the definition, maybe explain the origin if it's interesting or helpful, and definitely provide several good example sentences showing its use in context, like the BBC approach.
Laying that solid foundation. What comes next?
Then focused practice. You need activities that check understanding and reinforce the meaning.
Like fill in the blanks or matching the idiom to its definition.
Exactly. Those kinds of controlled exercises help solidify the basic meaning.
Makes sense. Then what?
The crucial step is moving to communicative activity. Get the learners actually using the idiom.
How? Role plays, discussions.
Yes. Things like role plays, maybe short interviews or debates where they have opportunities to naturally incorporate the idiom. Active production is key.
Right, because that's the goal, to be able to use it spontaneously.
Precisely. And finally, include some reflection.
What does that involve?
Discussing things like formality. Is this a casual idiom? Could you use it at work? What are other ways to say the same thing, maybe more formally? Helps learners understand appropriateness.
So introduce, practice, use, and reflect. That sounds like a really solid approach.
It covers the bases pretty well.
Can you walk us through a quick example, maybe using spill the tea again?
Sure. Okay, stage 1, presentation. You could play a short audio clip, maybe from a podcast, where someone uses spill the tea, explain the meaning, share gossip or secrets.
Okay, so context first.
Stage 2, practice communicative activity. Put learners in pairs. Ask them to think of a maybe fictional piece of gossip or interesting news and tell their partner, using the phrase, okay, spill the tea, or let me spill the tea about.
Getting them to use it immediately.
Yep. Stage 3, reflection. Have a quick class chat. Why is this idiom often used in informal, chatty contexts? What kind of tea usually spilled?
Connecting the idiom to its typical social situation. That's great.
It makes the learning much more practical and memorable.
Now, one thing we should probably touch on is sensitivity. Are there idioms learners should be careful about?
That is a really important point, yes. Some idioms might have historical origins that are offensive, or they might relate to sensitive topics like race, gender, or violence.
So it's not just about meaning and grammar, but also potential impact.
Exactly. It's vital to encourage learners and for teachers to be aware of these potentially problematic idioms. Check the history and modern connotations. ResearchGate articles sometimes discuss this need for cultural awareness.
Good advice. Better to be cautious than cause offense unintentionally.
Definitely. A quick search about an idiom's background before you adopt it is always a good idea.
Okay, so wrapping up, what are some go-to resources or tech tools people can use to boost their idiom learning?
Well, we've mentioned a few. Podcasts are fantastic again.
Yeah.
BBC Learning English programs available on places like Apple Podcasts are great for hearing idioms in context.
Listening practice, yeah.
Online corpora, like the Cambridge corpus, are invaluable for seeing real-world usage patterns. You can search millions of words of text and speech.
For the more analytical learner.
And websites like the British Council's Teaching English site have free lesson plans, worksheets, and interactive activities specifically focused on idioms.
So lots of accessible materials out there.
Definitely. Whether you prefer listening, reading detailed examples, or doing interactive exercises, there are resources to help.
Fantastic. Well, this has been really insightful. We've covered a lot about idioms.
We have. They might seem like a hurdle, but hopefully we've shown they're manageable and incredibly rewarding to learn.
Absolutely. Mastering them really does enrich your communication, deepen your understanding of English culture, and ultimately help you speak more fluently.
And remember those strategies. Find them in context, group them logically, use visuals, personalize them, compare them, check real usage. It makes the process much less daunting.
So here's a little challenge for you listening. As you go through your week, try to consciously notice the idioms you hear or read. Think about what they really mean beyond the literal words.
And maybe pick just one new idiom from our chat today. Maybe turn over a new leaf, or even spill the tea if the situation fits, and try to use it in a real conversation.
See how it feels. You might just surprise yourself. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive on Speak More Fluently.
Yeah, great discussion. Catch you next time.